All right, so let's just cut the crap and dive right into this whole Brexit shit show. What the hell was that all about? Seriously, 1 minute the UK is all lovey-dovey with the EU, and the next they're like flipping the bird and storming on. It's like watching some messy-ass divorce play out on the world stage. And we've got this Wikipedia article here on British influence, which honestly sounds about as exciting as watching paint dry, like some boring-ass think tank. But maybe you can help us unpack this clusterfuck.
Well, it wasn't exactly a sudden meltdown. This whole Brexit thing had been brewing for a while. There were these growing calls for the UK to just ditch the EU. And that's kind of where British influence comes in.
Okay, so these British influence asshats were basically trying to, like, cock-block Brexit. What a bunch of losers.
Well, I wouldn't say they were losers. They were formed back in the early 2010s when all this Eurosceptic bullshit was gaining traction. British influence was all about the pro-single market thing, which I know might sound like a bunch of wanky jargon, but basically they wanted the UK to, like, stay all cozy with the EU's free trade zone.
So no borders, no tariffs, just everyone getting their freak on with free trade. Sounds kind of kinky, but I guess I can see the appeal.
Right. The single market was all about making it easier for businesses to do their thing. Across different EU countries, think of it like a giant orgy of commerce, just without all the messy complications. British influence was trying to sell that idea to anyone who'd listen.
And they had some pretty big dick players on their side, right? This Wikipedia thing mentions some dudes named Danny Alexander, Kenneth Clark, and Peter Mandelson. Sounds like a law firm for shady-ass politicians.
They were actually some pretty influential figures. And from different political parties, too. Alexander was a liberal Democrat, Clark was a conservative, and Mandelson was Labour. Having them on board gave British influence some serious street cred, especially since they all agreed that sticking with the EU was the way to go.
So it wasn't just a bunch of fringe weirdos then. I guess even politicians can agree on something once in a while, even if it's some bullshit like staying in the EU.
They saw it as being in the UK's best interest, and they weren't afraid to make their voices heard.
Speaking of voices, where the hell did this British influence crew even crawl out from? Did they just materialize out of thin air or something?
They actually evolved from a group called Nucleus, which I know sounds kind of ominous, like the start of some fucked up tumor.
Nucleus, huh? Makes them sound like a bunch of nerdy scientists trying to build a political Frankenstein.
So how did these brainiacs try to influence people? Did they just lock themselves in a lab and cook up some crazy schemes?
They actually got out there and launched public campaigns, like one they called Our Biggest Market. They were trying to get all the small business leaders riled up about staying in the EU.
Our Biggest Market, huh? Clever name, but what the fuck do small businesses care about the EU? Were they promising them free blowjobs or something?
Not exactly. They were really hammering home the economic angle. The EU was a massive market for these small businesses.
Yeah.
And staying in it meant easy access to all those customers without the hassle of tariffs and other bullshit. So, more customers, more money, more hookers and blow. I guess I can see why these small business types might be interested. But weren't they worried about getting screwed over by the EU's bureaucracy and all that jazz?
Oh, there were definitely concerns about EU regulations and all that red tape, but British influence was trying to paint this picture of a utopian EU, where everyone wins.
Yeah, right. Like that's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So they were basically selling a fairy tale to these small businesses.
Well, they were trying to highlight the potential benefits of staying in. They understood that you can't just appeal to people's wallets. You got to tug at their heartstrings, too.
All right. So these British influence clowns were trying to sweet talk everyone into staying in the EU. But we all know how that shit show ended. Did they even manage to convince anyone? Or were they just pissing in the wind?
Well, it's easy to just dismiss them as a bunch of failures because, yeah, Brexit happened. But influence is a sneaky bastard. It's not always about instant gratification or, seeing your name in flashing lights.
So you're saying these British influence asshats weren't just a bunch of wankers with their dicks in their hands. They actually accomplished something.
Think of it like planting a seed. You don't see a fucking oak tree sprout up overnight, do you? Sometimes it's about shifting the conversation, making those stuffy politicians consider, like, a different perspective.
Okay, so these guys were like the gardeners of political bullshit, trying to cultivate some pro-EU flowers in a field of Brexit weeds.
They were definitely trying to shape the debate, by banging on about the single market and all the economic perks of EU membership. They might have gotten some people to at least question the whole Brexit frenzy.
So even if they couldn't stop the Brexit train wreck, maybe they managed to throw a wrench in the engine, like slow things down a bit.
It's possible, and those little shifts in thinking, they can have a ripple effect. It might influence future decisions, even if it doesn't seem like much in the moment.
All right, so these British influence clowns weren't completely useless, but let's get back to their strategy for a sec. How the fuck did they actually try to sway public opinion? Did they just like throw money at the problem and hope for the best?
They were actually pretty smart about it. They knew they couldn't win everyone over, so they targeted specific audiences with tailor-made messages like that our biggest market campaign we talked about. They zeroed in on small business owners because those guys were most likely to feel the pinch if the UK ditched the EU.
Yeah, appealing to their greed. Classic move. But did they just bombard them with boring-ass statistics and economic jargon?
Nah, they weren't stupid. They knew they had to appeal to people's emotions too, so they spun this yarn about the UK's place in the world, how being part of the EU was all about shared values and aspirations.
So a bit of patriotic wankery mixed in with the economic bullshit sounds like a recipe for success, at least with a certain crowd. But wasn't there a whole lot of resentment towards the EU? Didn't people feel like they were getting screwed over by those Brussels bureaucrats?
Oh, absolutely. There was this whole narrative about the EU being this evil empire, suffocating the UK with its rules and regulations. British influence had their work cut out for them trying to counter that bullshit.
So how the hell did they try to address those concerns? Did they just like stick their fingers in their ears and scream, la la la, can't hear ya?
No, they weren't that clueless. They acknowledged that the EU needed some reform, but they argued that ditching it altogether was like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
So a bit of tough love for the EU, trying to fix the damn thing from within, instead of just running away like a bunch of scared little bitches.
Exactly. They believed that the UK had more power to change things from the inside. Walking away would just leave them out in the cold.
Okay, I can see their point. But
Okay.
let's be real. Brexit happened. Clearly their message didn't exactly set the world on fire. Why the fuck do you think that was?
There are a lot of factors at play. You know, economic anxiety, worries about immigration, this whole take back control bullshit. It was a perfect storm of pissed off voters looking for someone to blame.
And let's not forget good old-fashioned xenophobia and nationalism. Those always play well with the knuckle-dragging crowd.
Yeah, those sentiments definitely fueled the fire. Plus, the Leave campaign was a well-oiled machine. They had the money, the media savvy, and the simple fear-mongering message that resonated with a lot of people.
So British influence was basically fighting an uphill battle against a bunch of well-funded, media-savvy assholes.
Pretty much. They were the underdogs in this fight, no doubt about it. But even in defeat, I think they managed to leave their mark.
Hold on. Are you telling me these British influence losers actually achieved something? Give me some fucking examples, because I'm not buying it.
Well, by constantly hammering on about the single market, they kept that issue front and center. Maybe they swayed a few voters, even those who ultimately voted to leave, and their arguments about the economic benefits of EU membership might have influenced the way the whole Brexit negotiation shit show played out.
So they were planting seeds of doubt, even in the minds of the Brexit diehards, making those politicians second-guess themselves.
Maybe. You never know what sticks in people's minds. Their efforts might have pushed the government to prioritize access to the single market, even after the UK left the EU. That's going to count for something, right?
So even though they got their asses kicked, they still managed to score a few points. I guess even losers can have their moments of glory.
Their legacy isn't about stopping Brexit completely. It's about shaping the narrative, you know, influencing the outcome in subtle ways that are still playing out today.
All right, I'm starting to see your point. Influence is a tricky bastard. It's not always about winning outright. It's about nudging things in a certain direction, even if it's just a little bit.
Exactly. British influence might not have stopped the Brexit train, but they might have managed to derail it just enough to change its course.
So what the fuck can we learn from these British influence clowns? What does this whole Brexit fiasco tell us about how political influence really works? Is it all about money and power, or can regular folks actually make a difference in this fucked up system?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, like most things in politics, is messy as hell.
So we got these shadowy groups like British influence, trying to pull strings and jerk off politicians. But at the end of the day, it's the people who hold the real fucking power.
Yeah, that's the messed up beauty of democracy, right?
Yeah.
It's chaotic as hell, unpredictable as a goddamn roulette wheel, but ultimately, it's the people's choice.
And sometimes those choices can be batshit crazy. I mean, who the hell could have predicted Brexit? It's like The entire UK decided to take a swan dive off the deep end.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand the whole damn game. You know, all the players, the motives, the narratives that get shoved down our throats.
So what's the takeaway here? What should our listeners be thinking about as they try to navigate this whole political shitstorm?
Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let those smug bastards tell you that your voice doesn't matter. Whether you're voting, protesting, or just raising hell online, make sure you're part of the conversation.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the complexities of political influence and the power of the people. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep diving deep into the bullshit.